Real brief, I want to do a slight follow-up to one of my videos on the Oklahoma City bombing. Uh, just today, got another book in the mail. Oklahoma City, what the investigation missed and why it still matters, by Andrew Gumbel and Roger Charles. I don't know much about Andrew Gumbel, but Roger Charles is following the footsteps of DJ Cash, who is a reporter from Oklahoma who has really investigated Oklahoma City for many years. He died maybe 2 or 3 years ago, but Roger Charles worked with him, and this is the fruition of his notes. So for those of you who, and all of his research, so for those of you who long for the days of true investigative journalism, and I mean like where they can actually cite sources and prove what they say and they don't write it otherwise, J.D. Cash is a scion of that. It still exists in America. Unfortunately, they don't rise very high, but they're out there. And this is the fruit of that labor. And I have not read this. I'm sure it's excellent. And I'm actually worried to start reading it because I probably won't be able to put it down. Several of my subscribers commented they don't know anything about Oklahoma City, including some that I was surprised by. Oklahoma City is a very fascinating criminal event, and even ignoring geopolitical philosophy things, it's just a very interesting thing. Definitely on par with, say, the Kennedy assassination or 9/11, except there's actually a lot more information available on this, relevant information. So that's that. Looks like a good book. It just came out. I pre-ordered it and it shipped Sunday night and came today. So that's not what I want to talk about, because just before I made this video, I watched a other type of journalism of the worst kind. It was Frontline. Now, Frontline is a program that I don't regularly watch, but I've seen it before, and sometimes it's been good. It's a program put on by PBS, for those of you who don't know. I'm going to assume that if you go on their website, you might even be able to watch the episode that I'm referring to. I think it's new. And it was about the financial crisis. And it's very disheartening, and it's good for libertarians like us. We think it's just common knowledge, that the government caused the financial crisis. But it's good for us to turn on the TV every once in a while. I know it's bad advice, and so I say that, with caution, and see what people who watch TV are seeing. Not that everyone watches Frontline. I mean, it's on at 9 p.m. I mean, it's competing with American Idol probably, so maybe not many people watch it, but I have to say it's like the evil Sith equivalent of Ron Paul and Mises and libertarianism. It really is. And without going into all the details, the premise behind the narrative that they craft is absurd. Basically, the narrative crafted is one of, we had deregulation, massive deregulation, we had a free market, the free market is evil and greedy and destructive, and it caused all of our problems. It caused the whole financial crisis is the free market's fault, and also the Republicans' fault, because Republicans and free markets are like the same thing, more or less. And the answer to all of this is more government. The government, if anything, the problem was we didn't have enough government, and the savior is Barack Obama. Literally, the iconography used in the episode, in the documentary, was one of was very messianic in their references to Obama. They continually quibbed about his intelligence, about how he knew what was going on. They would introduce him. They would show like Henry Paulson or Hank Paulson, the former Secretary of the Treasury, all like distraught and falling apart, and they'd play eerie music, and then it would go blank, it would go black, and then you'd hear like this chanting, and there'd be a picture, and it would be Obama's back, front lit, so he takes up the whole frame, looking out, and it was just like salvation. Really disgusting. Um, if I were to go through every fallacy that they laid out here, it would take too long and it would be redundant, but there's just a few that I can point out as absolutely obvious, glaringly obvious, and just pointing out these would be enough to show that the narrative as portrayed in the documentary, and the one that you'll hear when you talk to people, even if they never saw this Frontline episode because they've heard it before, because it's a narrative common on the left and on the right, unfortunately, is patently absurd. The interesting part is the narrator in the show, who of course has a very authoritative voice, at one point says, after 3 decades of continually lessening regulation, really, because that same narrator, if you go 5 minutes on either side of that statement, talks about Tim Geithner being in the Clinton administration and all the times that they bailed out, say, Thailand or Taiwan or Mexico, which, if I'm not mistaken, the Clinton administration was within the last 30 years. They also talk about Tim Geithner being, and Ben Bernanke being head of the Fed, of the Fed's enormous power, which is explicitly stated, of their influence and regulatory ability over financial markets, of the fact that that there even is a Fed. This would contradict the idea that there's no regulation. They interviewed all kinds of regulators. They even talked about how it's regulation that directs derivatives to be a certain way. So the whole argument is kind of silly. The other thing is, who do they interview? Of course, they interviewed Paul Krugman. Obviously, he's liberal and he has a Nobel Prize, hence he's an expert. There are other Nobel Prize winning economists who take an opposite view, and I don't refer here only to Hayek and Friedman. There's many others, but what the hell? This is PBS, and so we're just going to interview him repeatedly. Interestingly enough, when they talked to him, he would always refer to the Democrats as being highly intelligent and worthwhile, and the Republicans as being not scholarly and not the sharpest tool in the shed. So he can't even really hide his partisanship. But they interview Barney Frank, Chris Dodd, people who apparently are experts on all this, and of course Carl Levin. They interviewed Carl Levin, who is apparently an expert on banks and financial institutions. Now, Carl Levin happens to be the senator from my state, and I happen to have met him before. Not frequently, but before the financial crisis in 2005 or 6. He gave a speech. It wasn't really a speech. He gave a talk at my university in the president of the university's main audience chamber, which was a huge room with a big long table, but there were really only about 20 people there. It's kind of weird. It's very unusual, I think, to get that kind of access. And he was there to talk about how evil credit card companies are for loaning money out to people, even though he supports that when it comes to student loans, but whatever. And at that time I had just really gotten into like the Federal Reserve and all of that. And I asked him, when he was taking questions, I raised my hand, he selected me, and I said, don't you think it's fraudulent for banks, especially the Federal Reserve, to engage in fractional reserve banking, whereby they lend out more money at interest than they have on reserve in their deposits? Don't you think that's fraud, and don't you think that causes financial problems? And did he defend fractional reserve banking? Did he say that I didn't know what I was talking about? No, he said he didn't know what fractional reserve banking was. And he asked me he goes, what are you talking about? What do you mean they loan out more money than they have on the reserve? That's what fractional reserve banking is. Everybody knows that. even in this documentary I saw, some of the people they interviewed said, well, obviously a bank can't pay out if everybody shows up to get their deposits because they don't have that many. Well, Carl Levin either saw fit to lie in such a small setting, or Carl Levin doesn't know what fractional reserve banking was, or at least did not know in the years immediately preceding the financial crisis. But he's worthy of interview. And of course, we all know, conspicuously absent here, one man who predicted it, one person in Congress who predicted it and articulated it. And it's been admitted in the media, like I've seen enough on CNBC and MSNBC and even on Fox, where they've said, you were right, here's a clip of you years before saying exactly what was going to happen, to the point where it's even creepy. Was he on there? Was Ron Paul interviewed once? No. Barney Frank, Chris Dodd, Carl Levin, Nancy Pelosi, those people were. Those are the people that they talked to, not Ron Paul. Do they not know? Aren't those videos? This documentary was produced in the last couple months. Ron Paul's had videos with millions and millions of hits on YouTube. He's been running for president now twice since then. Do they just not know? I mean, they can't not know, right? Maybe they can't. I don't know. But Scott Horton, my favorite radio show host, who is the one who recommended this book, by the way, and whose archive on Oklahoma City you should all go and listen to, because there's, I think, probably by now 20 hours on it, says it's real, and this is so frustrating to me, and he's frustrated by it too, and I'm sure you all are as well. What we are told, what we are taught in school, and when you get in debates with people, this is the narrative that they say. We had a free market in the 1900s, or the 19th century, the 1800s. And the progress of civilization has been the government taking increasing power over it. That's what the progressive era is. That's what the New Deal is. That's what the Great Society is. Those are the three big ones. But those are like gradually increasing peaks on an upward slope. All right. It's not like we had the progressive era, and then we went back to laissez-faire of the 19th century, and then we had the New Deal, and then in the 1950s we went back to the 19th century, and then we had the Great Society, and then we went back to the 19th century. No, it's up and up, more and more, and liberals are proud of this. When I debate socialists and progressives and Democrats, they don't say, I wish we had more socialism, and I wish, well, they say that, but they say, oh, we wish that there'd been, they attribute our success to the ever-increasing role of government. I should say that. So they're saying that there's more government, and it's helping us. That's the reason that, like, we have cell phones and iPhones that have more apps than we can even use. They have so many applications that we don't even bother saying applications anymore. We've shortened it to apps because there's so many. It doesn't even make sense to say application. They would say that's because the government has grown and grown and grown and grown and grown. And yet, whenever there's a crisis, they pretend that it's been the 19th century up until then, that there hasn't been any government regulation, that there's been progressively less, even though they acclaim the fact that there's been progressively more, which is objectively true. The Federal Registrar gets bigger by tens of thousands of pages every year, Republican or Democrat. In fact, the last president, and I've said this before, who did anything approaching deregulation was a Democrat, and that was Carter, and he only did a little bit. On net, he was still increasing regulation. Certainly not Bush. Certainly not Reagan. Either Bush, not Clinton. Clinton was actually better because he had a Congress that was opposing him enough of the time that he did not get as much passed as he wanted. He was busy killing children in Texas and that sort of thing to get as many regulations passed as I'm sure he wanted, but you know, they were making they were mad that he was getting blowjobs and trying to impeach him for that, and well, that's retarded. At the very least, it prevented him from passing as many regulations as, say, George Bush was able to later. But it's just amazing. In one sentence, they'll say the law, the progress of government in making society better, and then the next the next sentence, it's they just pretend like Ron Paul has been president for the last 110 years, and everything's been going his way. And it's so weird because if you were to say, if we were to approach these people and say, this is what Ron Paul wants, this is his ideal, not his pragmatic political positions or his platform, but this is what he really believes, they would be aghast and be like, that would never work, we can't have that. And they'd be correct in the sense that we don't have that, and that would be a radical departure of what we have and what we've ever had, even in the 19th century. But then when it's time to place blame, they're going to pretend like it's Ron Paul's fault. And I use him as an example, but they're going to pretend it's the free market's fault. And we'd say that's cognitive dissonance, but I don't see any evidence that there's dissonance. I just see people holding two completely mutually exclusive, obviously antagonistic ideologies at the same time, and on the one hand, advancing different positions based on either one. And I don't know what to make of people like that. I got to where I am because I would see that, oh, that can't be right. Like, I used to be a minarchist, and I used to, think that, yes, taxation is evil, but you have to have a little bit of government. And so you have to, well, that doesn't make sense. You can't say taxation is evil, but then you need a little bit of evil to stop evil. That doesn't make sense. Maybe there's a minarchist rationalization that can get around it. I haven't heard that. But I couldn't find one, so I had to move on to a different argument. But most people, I know what it is. Most people just don't have any kind of pretense of even beginning to pursue truth or objective reality or anything like that. It's whatever makes me feel good right now. Well, reality has a way of biting us all in the ass. And Messiah God, Obama, has been in power now, and we've all reaped what we've sown. Actually, we haven't, unfortunately. We're only beginning to. And I don't know. It was just disgusting. The way that, it's creepy how they make him out to be so. This is the one thing about Obama that has made me hate him more than your normal politician. He lies no more than they all do, and he doesn't do things that are any worse, really. Yes, he's murdering people without trial or whatever, but come on, is that really that new? Only if we accept the dual morality of not killing Americans versus killing Americans does that even ring true. Because in war, they're always killing people without trial. But what really bugs me about him, and maybe I can't blame it on him because it's not necessarily his fault, although it does look like he fosters this, is the degree of adoration he gets. It's really creepy. It's the one thing that makes me think twice about dismissing the Antichrist. And I noticed this when he was running. And most of the things we see with him, we see with other politicians, but not to that degree. And here we've got, like, the people on Frontline, and the producers of Frontline are not idiots, despite everything I may have just said. And yet, I think, and I don't think it's like Obama paid them to make him look good. I think it's in spite of themselves. They can't help but see him because, again, their view of it is we needed more regulation. And then Obama says that, even though he doesn't always say that. And it's unclear how what he says is any different from what anyone else says. And so, and he is intelligent and articulate, and they see that as, if only if only he had been able to rule us. And there are other parts when they just start going all out, like, we need more. Oh yeah, one of the guys was like, oh, he was such a strong leader, and he was so authoritative, and it was creepy, very, very creepy. And my reaction to that, even though like I said, I don't see it that Obama's that much worse than other politicians, he's more dangerous in the by virtue of the fact that his followers, or that he has followers that view him so messianically. That means he's much more dangerous, because we all know that the power of the state is 99% ideological. And it's one thing to be kind of tacit and be like, well, he's the president, all right. It's another thing to be like, that's a lot worse. And we saw that a lot when he got elected, and I was hoping now that the honeymoon was over and we'd see less of that. And I'm sure we are, but there's still an awful lot. And there's a lot of people who are still like under his spell, it would look like, although I wonder if it's so much his spell, if not their spells. But anyway, I'm just venting here because it was disgusting. So let me know what you think. And go ahead and read about Oklahoma City. And that's Bill Clinton's crime. But you will note there are more than a few people in the Clinton administration who are in the Obama administration. And they've all... their punishment for their crimes has been promotion. And I won't condescend to name them here, but if you ever read the book, you'll know who I'm talking about. All right, that's it.